Hi. Okay. I hope by now all of you have understood the concept of levels of consciousness, and you've understood how our consciousness is actually divided into the conscious, pre-conscious, and the unconscious level. And you've understood the importance of unconscious in guiding our behavior. In this video, we'll be again talking about another very interesting aspect of psychodynamic therapy, which is id, ego, and superego. Okay, and interestingly, I'll tell you one thing. It is the first concept of psychology that I ever read about, that I ever come across, which made me fall in love with psychology. Okay, so I remember my professor in college when he was talking about and trying very hard to give examples to help us understand what id, ego, superego is. And I remember sitting in that classroom spellbound, looking like this at him and like, wow, this sounds really interesting. It would be fun to know more about such kind of theories in detail and trying to understand what does it really mean, how much can it tell us about people. Okay, so id, ego, and superego actually is what made me fall in love with psychology. Okay, so what is id, ego, and superego? So we can visualize id, ego, and superego as three different forces that work inside our mind. So let's imagine them as three different monkeys that are jumping somewhere there in our mind. All three of them want different things. So the first monkey is id. Now the id actually basically works on our animal instincts. What does id want? The id monkey wants satisfaction of his basic primal animal instincts. It works on the pleasure principle. Okay, so it basically seeks pleasure and it wants to avoid pain. It doesn't care about people, it doesn't care about culture, society, rules. So if our instincts are sexual gratification, if our instincts are expressing anger or showing aggression, if our instinct is, suppose I'm hungry and I want food, basically the id monkey is continuously telling me, go grab that food, go grab that food. It doesn't care whether that food is mine or somebody else. Okay, so it just wants you to get pleasure. Whatever you need at any given time to get pleasure, that will give you pleasure, it will continuously tell you. It is that little devil in your head, go do that, go do that. Oh, you're angry at that person, go slap that person. Okay, it doesn't care whether whether you should be doing that or how that person would feel or anything like that. So it basically works on pleasure principle. It basically wants it basically wants us to satisfy our basic primal animal instincts. It is continuously telling us to go attain instant gratification and get that pleasure out of things, whatever and whenever we want to. Now, the second monkey that is inside, the second force which is very strong and is working inside our head is the ego. Okay, ego, what is the job of the ego? Ego works on the reality principle. So the ego monkey tells it, wait a minute, okay, you can't do it this way. It finds a socially acceptable way to satisfy the animal instincts that it has, but in a way that will be socially acceptable. And I'll give you an example. Okay, so suppose you're very hungry and you're walking down the road and you see lovely pastries displayed and lovely confectionaries and desserts displayed in a shop window. Okay, so what does your id tell you? Just go grab that pastry and eat it. You're hungry, you want food, go grab it and eat it. And what will ego tell you? Your ego will tell you, wait a minute, you can't do that. You will be punished if you do that. That will be like thieving. That will be like robbery. The police will charge you for theft. So you can't just really take that pastry just because you want it. Let's go and buy that pastry and eat it. That way we'll be happy. So that is the role of the ego, finding a socially acceptable way to satisfy it. Okay, so it acts as a balancing factor. Okay. So there's a really nice, you need to go to a party and there's a really nice dress you want to wear that your friend has. Your id will say, just go and grab it from her. You don't even need to tell her you want that dress, just take it, who cares? But your ego will tell you, wait a minute, she's your friend, you can't just take other people's things, she'll feel bad. Just ask her, just tell her that you need that dress for one day and she'll give it to you. So your ego will tell you a realistic way of achieving those pleasure that it is seeking. So the ego works on reality principle. Okay, it is very important for you. These are the key phrases that you should be writing in your notes. Id works on pleasure principle. All it wants is pleasure. Ego works on reality principle. Okay, so based on what reality is, it finds a more practical way of helping it satisfy its cravings. Now the third monkey in our head. So the id and the ego have this thing between them, chemistry between them. They have an understanding between them how they will function. Now the third monkey in our head, the third force, very strong force that functions in our mind is the superego. So we have id, we have ego, and we have the superego. Now the superego works on the morality principle. You know, it is that little guy in our head that keeps asking us the question of, is it morally correct what you are doing? It will keep reminding you. Okay, so suppose your farewell is coming, class 12, and it is telling you, go to the mall and buy the most prettiest dress that you want to. You need a dress, you want a dress, it's going to make you happy. Just go shop, it doesn't matter. Whatever you want, you go to the mall and take whichever dress you want. Ego will tell you, wait a minute, you can't just take a dress that you want. You need to go, you need to spend money, and you need to buy. You need to see how much money do you have, and you need to buy it using that money. The superego will tell you, of course you can buy the dress for the farewell, but do you really need that dress? I think there are many dresses lying in your cupboard which you have never really worn enough. Why not just choose one of those dresses? After all, we know our parents don't have so much of money. The other day mother was talking about how difficult how many difficulties she's facing with respect to her finances. So let's not overspend on dresses. We can manage by ourselves. So superego is that moral monkey that will keep reminding you, yes, you can do it, but do you need to? Is it morally correct? Is it ethically correct? Okay, so we have id that works on pleasure principle. We have ego that works on reality principle, and we have the superego that works on the morality principle that will continuously keep reminding you, do you need it? Is it really required? Yes, you can buy it. Ego is correct. You can buy the dress that you want using the money, and it is so going to be socially acceptable. But superego tries to keep us away from feelings like guilt, frustration. After buying the dress, I should not feel guilty that I overspent my mother's hard-earned money. I shouldn't feel like, okay, I did it, but I think it was not the best thing to do. It wasn't the best thing to do. Okay, so in our mind, it is wanting something else. Ego is telling us to do something else. Superego is something else. What Sigmund Freud said was, as long as id, ego, and superego work in harmony, you're happy. Your mind is at peace. Everything is balanced. There is emotional stability. Okay? But if there is any kind of an unbalance happening between what id wants, what ego wants, and what superego is saying, that imbalance is going to cause a lot of emotional turmoil and unrestlessness feeling in our mind. And this unrestlessness, this emotional and psychological turmoil is what is actually the cause of all the psychological problems that occur. Okay? Now it is very important to understand all of us have got id, ego, and superego inside our heads. But for each one of us, how dominant is id, how dominant is ego, and how dominant is superego is very different. Okay? So for those people who have a very strong and dominant id, They are the impulsive kind of people, you know, the kind of people who struggle with controlling their emotions and impulses, the kind of people who feel अरे यार गुस्सा आ गया उस टाइम गुस्से में कुछ भी कर दिया सोचा नहीं, and then they regret it. Okay, they were not able to control it in that moment. So those are the kind of people, impulsive people. In them the id is very strong. Okay, the id is able to guide their behavior. In that moment you wanted to do something, you just listen to it. It was saying go punch that boy who said xyz to you. You're feeling angry, go punch him, and you end up doing that. It doesn't matter, later you might regret. So your id was predominant in you. There are some people who are very principled people, who are always, throughout their life, no matter what they do, they always want to do the right thing, you know, the so-called principled people who would never do anything wrong. So for them the superego is very dominant, though, for those kinds of people. So for each one of us we have id, ego or superego, one of them that is more dominant than the others. But what is needed is, in most of the situations at least, we need a delicate balance between id, ego and superego. Should this balance be disturbed because of any reason, it causes a lot of emotional turmoil. Okay, so you need to make notes about what id is, what ego is, and what superego is. The important thing to include while you're describing id, ego, superego is the fact that id works on pleasure principle, ego works on reality principle, and superego works on morality principle. Okay, and then you need to explain the three of them taking an example. Okay, so you can take the example of a boy being hungry and how it is telling him to just grab that food, but ego would tell him he can't. He needs to pay money to the shopkeeper and get it. And maybe his superego would say, okay, but if he wants to buy that, probably he should be asking permission from his mother first, because that would be the correct thing to do. That would be the superego. So you could use an example similar to that. You can come up with your own creative example. That would be the best thing. If you can come up with your own example to explain id, ego, superego, it would mean you have really understood this concept of id, ego and superego really well. Okay, so that is another very interesting thing that Sigmund Freud came up with in his psychodynamic theory of personality. Okay, so by knowing which part of your personality is more developed, which life force. So these are three forces that are within. I named them as monkeys. They're not really monkeys. Okay, they are three different forces that are working in our mind all the time. Okay, so based on which force is how strong and predominant, Sigmund Freud said accordingly our personality develops.